Hi, good morning to all, and a very good evening to some. Thank you for joining this presentation. A warm welcome to each of you who could join me today. I'm Chris, working as a senior technical content designer with Atlassian, currently based out of Melbourne. So let's get started. This topic we're going to present here is about how peer writing has shaped and helped in an open source environment. How it has been fueling the success for sustaining open source projects as a key element. It's not about one individual, but it's about a group, about a collective collaborative effort. Want to iterate the fact that we are significantly more impactful collectively than we are as a group of individuals. During the course of the project, the enlightenment was that it's not only applies to micro level of working on a project, but also at macro level of contributing to a wider community. An open source project, which in our case is the Good Docs project, that has given all of us a great platform to contribute, learn, and make a difference in the technical communication space. Well, every individual has a distinct reason to get onto an open source project. And here we want to tell a story of a global collaboration that focused on adding value to our growth and also to the community. Before I even jump into the presentation, I want to make it clear that it's an effort of a small group of individual writers who has a distinct reason to get onto an open source project and an immensely uh, great support system that put us on the right direction and aim for that north star in the community as a whole. That's me from Melbourne, Australia, and that's Gayatri, one of the other writers from Singapore, and Nelson from Nairobi. And as I said, the backbone, the torchbearers, and the support system of highly talented community as a whole that we have. As they say, it takes a village to raise a child. So was the template. We had mentors. We had the EMEA APAC working group where ideas were discussed. We had a loose connection back into the wider Good Docs project and other template development initiatives. Want to highlight the relationship we had with the community as a whole, and in this particular case, we got inspired from Diana, an open source contributor who was working on a sister template project, and where we could get a lot of inspiration from. And of course, Cameron Shorter, who was our mentor during the entire course of our project, who listened to all of our rant in every meeting, plus supporting us in reviewing the PR. Let's move on and talk about what I'm going to talk today. So let's begin. So what I'm talking today, we're talking about peer writing. We're going to talk about the challenges, myths, and the solutions and outcome of our journey. Let make a step back and give a quick understanding of pair programming. The structure of pair programming, as many might of you know already, has two rules: driver and the navigator. The driver is the one who hands on the keyboard, writing the code. The navigator is the one who observes and reviews each line of code as it is typed in. The driver's fundamental job is to deal with the details of typing, writing ideas into the computer. Also, the driver's main goal is to be of service to the navigator with trust and support. One of the challenges you see in this form is that since the primary job of the driver is to type the code, it can be a little difficult for them to think several steps ahead. While this requires being comfortable working with an incomplete understanding of the task, it is usually considered as a more efficient way to work. Well, this is a very interesting problem and a good problem to have as it brings in trust between the driver and the navigator over the period of time. I'll explain you how we faced this challenge and what benefit we got over the course of the project. Let's see what we have done. We have taken almost a similar approach, but this time instead of two, we had three writers who were working together. By experience, we all mostly agree that it's quite easy to fall into a creative rut from time to time when working as an individual. But with collaboration and working concurrently, it can it is quite rare to get into that monospace and leading to creative paralysis. Well, I'll be discussing more on how multiple writers can work together on a single document and still be friends at the end of the project. Every individual has a different reason behind getting onto an open source project, and I'm sure there'll be overlapping and unique reasons for many other good docs writers. But if you look closely, all of us have a noble reason, a reason to add value to the open source project, and also each of us are encountered with some challenges. These challenges are what we faced in real, as in while we are working. For example, Gayatri, who was nervous and also excited for her first contribution, she needed to feel safe. Nelson had a similar challenge, for example, finding someone to guide and show him around and knowing if a project was right for him. For me, it was to give back what I've learned in my 15 years of technical communication space and hoping to meeting the project timelines with my busy schedule. Also, how the project helps in our personal goals. For example, for a fellow writer who is trying to transition from another industry to technical writing and wants to gain experience from other writers, and for another writer, it was to add more value to the profile and gain more experience in a particular space of technical writing. Thus began the story of global collaboration between three writers who had diverse backgrounds and with a community who were there always to support the project, gave us the direction that was needed. Our goal was to plan, explore, analyze, create, and publish an exemplary quick start template. We want to get the best quick start template. That was the simplest goal that we could lay down. Here's a working model in brief. We jumped onto the Slack every week, and every week we set some goals to do research. The research was to look out there on the web and collect what we find, dump everything that we think is the best. This mitigates the incomplete understanding that the driver has, while the navigator provides the details to a large extent. This was the exact problem I was talking about in my earlier slide about the driver navigator problem. Gayatri was a driver, and she's the one with the keyboard and typing the ideas, suggestions that the navigator, and in this case, it was Nelson and I. If you observe, we all went into the project based on the research that we have done, and we are mostly on the same level of understanding on the problems we are trying to solve. There are a lot of things that are uncovered slowly. Example, Gayatri was exceptional at researching. She will get links that we never knew existed, and she has a great memory. Nelson is good at rephrasing a dull statement and adding life to it. And I like to question and love the reasoning behind what was being written. The meeting were booked for 1 hour, but they always go beyond 2 hours. No one is bored. Everyone is learning, and in the back of the mind, they know the goal. And as I stated earlier, all of us have our own set of motivations, and all of us knew that we what we were doing and why we were doing it. The biggest takeaway is the humbleness that peer rating approach brought us to these meetings, and in the process, providing a safe space for all of us to speak our minds. In summary, Different backgrounds created different breadth of experience. There are times where our professional and personal schedule can take over, and we respected that. But this approach always helped in reducing the risk factor of not completing by having others to cover for each other always. And more importantly, and want to stress on this point, we many times took decisions to the EMEA APAC working group for wider discussion, enabling us to always stay connected with a wider group for better output of our work. This question is the elephant in the room. It also it's so delicate and can make or break things. There were tons of conflicts, some spoken and some not. Let's get into these common conflicts that we faced as a group. These are some of the conflicts that we want to highlight. It's interesting how even a small understanding can also lead to a conflict. For example, style. We were always debating on the way we need to structure our template and also the style guide to refer for consistency. We jumped from MSTP to Google style guides, and we were kind of settled with Google style guides later. We also used minimalistic approach, making less verbose and ensuring we always write instructions succinctly. As we have different ideas, it's hard to get to let go that which is close to the initiator. There were few that we turned down again as a group, but this did not stop us keep giving ideas. We as a group always felt a psychological safety. Well, to give you a one-liner description about what psychological safety is, it's a shared belief held by members of a team that others on the team will not embarrass, reject, or punish you for speaking up. We had some ideas that worked, and we had ideas that didn't work. Uh, to give you an example, there was a suggestion that we need to have a checklist doc to identify if all the sections of the quick start is complete. It's definitely a great suggestion, but we as a group did more research and understood that it would be an additional overhead or redundant information as a template, and the accompanying guide that we going to provide as part of defining this template will suffice that purpose. In summary, yes, not always you agree with someone's reasoning. We all understood that all of us had only one goal: create the best quick start template. Hence, we were more receptive to receiving feedback and did not take the criticism personally. This sense of saying no and also receiving feedback against our initial reasoning to a particular idea brought us awareness of the problem that we are trying to solve. And in the process, we learn how to put the best foot forward. We focus on the problem, not the person. We didn't point to each other of our weaknesses, we acknowledge them. And at the end of the day, we know our goals, personal and also professional. And well, a note here is that this took some time, definitely. We didn't jump to each other to help each other out, but we gave enough space to each other and learned each other's motivation. Question when in doubt. Simple. We encouraged, we debated, we asked for proof, we asked to do more research if we didn't agree on anything. And then, if the problem still existed, we went to the community heads, mentors, and asked for help, which always worked. Though we worked in a group, the group may not always be right in getting the answers. We, in the process, understood that it is absolutely fine to get stuck and seek help when needed. We did amongst ourselves, and this gave us a new skill that, as writers, we need to understand it is okay to ask for help in the community, and trust us. It always worked for us. We all understand mostly that in technical writing there's no definite right answer, just varying degrees of opinions. It is easy to get caught by decision paralysis. We recognize that it is better to make best guess suboptimal decisions than to make no decision at all. Let's see what were the outcome of this approach. I'm going to talk in brief on each of these points in the consequent slides. First, any highly functioning team have these traits in common: trust. We as a group trusted each other, mutual respect, thinking about each other on a personal level. Ev- Everyone willingly and enthusiastically stepping in and helping out on what they can help with. I said earlier, we looked out for each other. For instance, in our case, as Nelson, who wasn't from a technical writing background and want to set his feet in the technical writing space, it is apt for me to provide that guidance. The simplest of the things I've done is to send him the PDF copy of MSTP and also guide it toward Google style guides. That built a trust, and that helped him to understand that everyone is trying to help out each other. In my case, with having quite a bit of experience, I do get blindsided, surely. But with Nelson on the board, the fresh eyes picked out of my curse of knowledge, as I call, and eventually helping me out from his geospatial technical domain expertise from the Geo Live project that he was working on. This also answers the question of how, as individuals, we are outspoken and also welcomed each other's feedback. Effectively, we have been working in a gift economy. Accept what you need, give what you can. It has been hard, but has been very rewarding. This was an example. I mentioned how this there is a collaborative approach and is a true testimony of how we collaborated within the working group and also the community for the expertise. Here's an example where Gayatri researched a blog to understand the differences between a quick start versus getting started. The blog was more paragraph based, and Nelson and I suggested if it can be made as a tabular format that would make it succinct. The blog also had content related to marketing guide, and as a group, we thought it was not applicable for comparison with respect to quick start and getting started guide. We initially omitted it, however, we did take it to the community and got suggestions. It would be good add-on for the template as we don't have such a document to highlight all these differences in at one place. The outcome was spot on, and this showed how the collaboration flowed across seamlessly from working group to community and back to the working group again. Looking after each other, it's a daunting experience for someone new to uh, any new project. Could be an open source project and also a project within the organization, and you always feel you don't want to make that obvious mistake as a newcomer, though there's none. You can always rely on other team member and have a comfort zone established. Don't put them in a spot, rather encourage them to speak. We kind of made a conscious effort to draw that line and also ask their opinion on something that they will surely answer. I specifically want to call out two examples on how this approach has helped the expert newbies contribute to the Good Dogs project. Ophelia, a developer writer from Ghana who came to the Good Dogs project to expand her knowledge and contribute. In general, it's a common hesitancy or fear for someone who joins a project, not just an open source project, as I mentioned earlier. It can be within your organization. To help Ophelia's initial hesitancy, we encourage her to join our working group and be part of an ongoing work. She was initially passive, but with her encouragement and her enthusiasm and initiative, she has become an active and valued contributor. Ophelia is now working on two projects and have been an active contributor. That's a true testimony how peer writing approach has helped the newcomers onboard to an open source project and have sustained motivation to contribute. And so was one of other senior writer Meng Meng from Shanghai, who joined a group as a listener. Uh, this senior experience has meant that we have been able to trust her with the more technically challenging role of leading a group. And now she is leading API reference template documentation project with a peer writing approach, coordinating a total of four other writers with varied experiences. It's amazing how this approach has enabled newcomers move from being a passive contributor to more active contributor. Yes, collaboration is slower and more time consuming than if you do it yourself, but we felt is that these are common challenges that are faced not just in open source environment but also in an office environment. But the pros outweighs the cons. With respect to open source, the collaboration is risky. You depend upon the goodwill of volunteers who have family and work commitments, which might take priority, or they might just get bored and leave. Open source collaborations, as we all understand, it is time consuming. It could get very imprecise, unreliable, hard to manage, uh, rarely addresses short term objectives, and hard to quantify in a business case. And yet, in a digital economy, collaborative communities regularly out innovate and compete closed and centrally controlled initiatives. The slide speaks it all. Multiple teams are now adopting this approach in the Good Dogs project. Many have established connections with wider community, broadened their network, and added skills. Well, this very presentation wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have an opportunity to collaborate in peer writing model, and and an opportunity to meet people from different cities, countries, and even continents. I've talked enough, and it's your turn to unleash this amazing technique, which is not new, but definitely worth giving a try on your next project. That brings an end to this presentation. Uh, Thank you so much for listening, guys. Hope this presentation did add value. The time you spent, and and thank you for the WTD Portland conference for giving this wonderful opportunity to present. Well, we have our fellow Good Dogs project contributors around. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
I've got a whole bunch of questions, so I'll get into them. And like many things, we've got a lot of enthusiasm about tooling. So the first question for Chris is, what are some of your favorite collaboration tools that help empower writers to be successful with pair writing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've been asked this question many a times. We want to keep it as simple as possible, Janine. And what we started off is Google Docs as our main go-to tooling. And then once we have a draft version ready, then we move to Visual Studio Code. That's where we build our .md file and then try to push it to the uh, repo so that the PR get raised. So that's been very simple. So no fancy tools as such. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. We also had questions about what the process looks like. So when you're peer writing a document, do you write down an outline maybe and assign parts of the document to individuals and then everybody peer reviews maybe? Or Valeria, who wrote the question, she's also wondering maybe everybody contributes whatever they can and then a leader reviews and edits instead? Like what does it look like?
Yeah, as I said in the talk, it's a collaborative effort with the peer writing, wherein we were three in this case, and there's always a constant support that's coming from the community itself. So as I said, we jump onto the Slack, and we know what we are working on. We understand our goal, and then we do a parallel research. Go out on the web and look for content that we want to get into, and once we're there, and then we come back, and then driver, who is in our case Gayatri, would type in the words, and then we discuss a lot. As I said, there would be a lot of conflict that arises during this period. That's when we try to discuss and listen to each other. Once we're still not convinced, definitely there are many times we are not convinced about each other's analogy, then we then take it to the community, where we meet weekly, and then we get some guidance from there, and then we'll get back to work, and then the cycle repeats. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I can imagine that would require a really good like collaborative dynamic, and so I think that brings us to some questions we got from Lana about hiring. So people are wondering about maybe some red flags, but also green flags that you look for when you're interviewing people. Things that stand out, maybe good or bad ways, things that you really look for that you found have given you teams of people who work well together, I guess.
I think I said in the talk that interviewing is a really terrible way to work out who's a good fit and who isn't. For me, it's quite often about the conversation. I think, as I said, that I plan my questions out ahead of time so everyone gets the same questions. And it's really interesting, especially once you've done 2 or 3, of asking the same questions, how different people answer. And you start, oh, we've got a visitor. That's awesome. So I think for me personally, it's that instant reaction when you ask the question. I love watching people's faces when I ask the question. Things like, tell me about your experience with Doxers code or whatever. And you'll see sometimes there's that moment where they're trying to parse what you've just said. Oh my goodness, what is Doxers code? And then the very first thing they'll jump to is, well, I had experience with this at this company or whatever, and and trying to see if they move closer to an answer or move closer to a better answer over time. So I guess I wouldn't say there's red and green flags straight up. I mean, unless they're overtly racist or something, just something terribly. I did have one person I interviewed who constantly used he to mean a developer, and I'm just like, yeah, it's not necessarily a red flag, it's just icky feeling. So I wouldn't say I have a red flag or a green flag necessarily. It's just that conversation, seeing how people react, seeing that instant reaction when you ask a question is really interesting, I think.
That's great. We also had some great comments. Brooke said that one thing that she likes to remind herself about people is that you hire for culture add, not culture fit. And then Mo added that culture add is for yogurt, not for tea.
Yes, I liked that. And at the time I was writing the talk, I was reading a particular book, which I think I referenced in there so people can look it up, which does talk a lot about how our brain fools us on things like that. And that was really relevant to me at the time that I was going through some hiring just recently. It's really, really easy to just hire the person that you got along well with, that you had a great chat with, whether or not they've got the relevant experience or qualifications that you look at. Culture fit is great, but it also means you end up hiring clones of yourself. And as I've gone on over the years, I've gotten more and more conscious of that fact. I always wanted to hire my friends. I wanted to hire people I got along really well with. And that's great. I've ended up with some great friends from teams that I've built over the years. I don't regret that at all. But I also I want to be much more conscious of not hiring people who are like me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. So both of your talks, we all had questions about drawing parallels between writers and engineers and or programmers. And I think it's often because there's a lot of overlap there. So I'll ask you both questions about that, if that's okay. Chris, Jen was wondering, do you think that some of the challenges that tech writers face when pair writing are similar to challenges that programmers might face when they're pairing, or do you think that it's different because of the nature of the task that they're doing? I'd be interested to get your thoughts.
I cannot talk on behalf of what programmers go through, because I'm not being a programmer, and I kind of understand the model. But some of the challenges that we try to solve through programming and through peer writing is, how do you onboard somebody who is totally new? And for instance, the examples that I gave were in Ophelia and Meng, who are new to the project, who want to understand the Good Docs project as a whole. How do they put their footstep into the door, right? So they came in, they listened, and then they understood, okay, fine, these are the things that I need to know. This is where my repo is. These are the people whom I talk to. So that gave them a good onboarding experience. That's one. And in terms of writing itself, as I mentioned, Nelson, who is a new to technical writing field, who want to understand the nitty-gritties of technical writing and want to contribute, eager to contribute, that gave him a great platform to run through the process of how technical writing as such works, where I have a little bit of experience, Gayatri has some experience in writing. So we all kind of embraced him into the technical writing process over the period of time. He learned a lot. So that was some of the challenges and also some of the solutions that peer writing has helped.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. For Lana too, the question from Heather was, do you think that the career tracks for tech writers should closely mirror engineering tracks, or do you think that we should have something different and something that suits the field better?
I like having the mirror engineering. That works especially well if Docs is part of engineering, because I want my technical writers to feel just as valued and respected as the developers on the team. And to feel like they've got the same kind of career opportunities as well. I think sometimes, especially when you've had developers move into technical writing, it's like all of a sudden they realize all their career prospects are different, or their career path or their track is different. And we don't want that. So definitely, especially if technical writing is part of engineering, it should mirror. I think at the moment, our Docs team is not part of engineering, but it's a very, very small company as well. So it's a lot more flexible. But I think I like the idea of having that dual track for people. Not everyone wants to go into management. Not everyone is well suited to management. Some people just want to get really, really good at what they do technically without having to lead other people. And I'm speaking as someone with an MBA, I feel like management is a very specific set of skills and knowledge, separate to our technical knowledge, separate to our technical writing knowledge. So yeah, I like the idea of having that dual track personally. And engineering has already done a lot of the hard work and the heavy lifting there for us. So let's borrow from that, definitely.
That's great. Thank you. We're getting close-ish to the end of our time, so I'll ask one more question each. Since we're talking about, what suits a good candidates, figuring out how to get them onto that track. One really popular question for you, Lana, was how much do you trust writing tests as part of the hiring process? Because interviewing isn't great. Are writing tests any better?
Nothing's perfect. I've gone back and forth and round on writing tests so many times. I never used to, I did them and then I stopped doing them and now I've started doing them again. My current thinking is they're a valuable tool in the toolbox. I like giving people a simple one-page writing test. I tell people it shouldn't take more than an hour. If it takes them more than an hour to just stop and note where they got up to. I certainly don't want to I don't want candidates spending huge amounts of time on their weekend, especially, remember, of course, women and people of color are generally, or people from more disadvantaged backgrounds don't have that spare time, and I don't want to force them to use it. So I don't like having anything that's going to take a lot of time. And I also don't want to make any hiring decisions based solely on a writing test. I've had people come through the interview process, did really, really well through interviews and bombed out on the writing test. In fact, one of them was the worst writing test I've ever seen, and we hired them anyway. So it's a useful tool in the toolbox. I certainly wouldn't put all my eggs in that basket, though.
Yeah, great, thanks. And Chris, our final question for you. Just in general, if you find that your company's culture maybe doesn't have that collaboration that you're wanting to see, do you have tips on changing that culture and bringing that collaboration just into how people interact with each other to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, I work with this company called Atlassian. Blessed to have this culture ad that everybody's talking about. We definitely considered this technique as one of our onboarding techniques. I pitched this idea to our manager, and then she absolutely loved it. So hopefully we would see some change in terms of how we can onboard new technical writers, wherein the goal is simple, wherein we don't have to list all these documents on the company's standards and consistencies. Instead, show them around, be part of one of the docs that they're working on, help them to see how the other person is doing. So that gives more value and more comfort. So that's what we're trying to bring in. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. I always love these Q&A periods. Everybody is so engaged, and that's why, unfortunately, there's always more questions than we can answer reasonably, but I'm sure that people are going to be paying you. There's so much interest in what you have to say, and just we're also grateful that you came to talk to us about it today. So this is just such a great closer to day one. I wanted to thank everybody who's watching for attending. For anybody who still has time, who doesn't need to go to bed like immediately, again, due to time zones, we're going to take a little break, and then we'll have a social event at 5 Pacific. So we hope you can make it. Otherwise, we'll see everybody tomorrow. And thank you again, Chris and Lana. So great to talk to you.